If you think August means your garden is winding down, I need you to forget that idea right now. Empty beds, slowing tomato plants, seed packets going back into the drawer, that is what most people picture when the calendar hits August. But gardeners who actually understand this season see something completely different. They see a second spring. Here is why. The soil right now is still holding onto all that summer heat, which means seeds you plant today can germinate faster than they ever would in cold spring dirt. At the same time, the weeks ahead are only going to get cooler, and cooler weather is exactly what makes a huge number of vegetables turn sweeter, crisper, and more tender than anything you grew back in June. There is real chemistry behind this. As nights get colder, plants start converting the starch they have stored into simple sugars, almost like a natural antifreeze for their own cells. That is the actual reason a carrot pulled in November can taste completely different from the same carrot pulled in July. But this window will not stay open forever, and that is the part most people miss. Once daylight drops below roughly 11.5 hours a day, plant growth slows down dramatically, no matter how much you water or fertilize. So every single plant on this list needs enough time left in the season to either finish growing or reach a harvestable size before that slowdown hits, and before your first frost shows up and ends things for good. Today I am giving you 21 vegetables you can still get into the ground, starting right now. Some of these will be on your plate in under a month. Some of them are actually going to taste better because of the cold, not in spite of it. And the plant sitting at number 1 on this list is racing directly against the weather. Plant it even a week or two late, and you could lose the entire harvest before it ever produces a single pod. Let's get into it. Before we start, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching this from and what growing zone you are in, because timing on this list is going to shift depending on your location, and I want to see how different everyone's window actually is. And if you want more videos like this, breaking down exactly what to plant and when, go ahead and hit subscribe now so you do not miss the next one. All right, let's start the countdown. Number 21, Napa cabbage. Napa cabbage gets overlooked because people assume it is just a fancier version of regular cabbage, but the way it handles this season makes it worth its own spot on this list. Sown or transplanted in August, the plant spends its early weeks building leaves in the leftover summer warmth, then heads up as temperatures fall, which produces a tighter, sweeter head than anything grown in the heat of summer. It matures in roughly 50 to 80 days depending on the variety, so start counting backward from your first frost date now. Give it room, the outer leaves spread wide before the head tightens in the center. And do not rush the harvest. A Napa cabbage that gets a few cold nights before you cut it will taste noticeably sweeter than one you pull too early. Number 20, bok choy. Bok choy might be the most forgiving vegetable on this entire list, and that makes it a perfect one to start with if you are new to fall planting. Plant it in spring, and it will often bolt within weeks because rising heat and lengthening days push it straight into flowering. Plant it in August, and it experiences the opposite conditions, shrinking days that actually support steady leafy growth instead of triggering a flower stalk. Direct sow the seed about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch deep, and thin the seedlings anywhere from 4 to 12 inches apart depending on whether you want small heads or full-sized ones. It matures in about 45 to 60 days and actually tolerates partial shade well, which makes it a smart choice if part of your garden is already shaded by taller plants. Bok choy is proof that a fall vegetable does not need to be complicated to be reliable. Number 19, cabbage. Regular cabbage rewards patience in a very specific way. The roots establish themselves while the soil is still warm from summer, but the head itself forms during the cooler weeks of fall, and that timing difference actually produces heads that are noticeably larger and denser than the ones you would get from a spring planting. Set transplants out in early to mid-August. If space is tight, try a double row pattern, 2 lines spaced about 10 to 12 inches apart on one wide bed, which lets you fit more plants without sacrificing airflow. Cabbage is also one of the toughest plants on this list once it is established, tolerating temperatures as low as 20 degrees Fahrenheit without much trouble. That means even if your fall turns colder than expected, cabbage is not the plant you need to worry about. Number 18, Brussels sprouts. This is the long game vegetable, and it does not forgive delay. Brussels sprouts need somewhere around 90 to 100 days to mature, which means if you are not getting them into the ground in early August, you are already cutting it close for most regions. What makes them worth the wait is how they grow. The sprouts mature from the bottom of the stalk upward, so instead of one single harvest moment, you get a rolling harvest that stretches across several weeks. And like a lot of plants on this list, repeated frosts actually improve the flavor, softening the slightly bitter edge and letting a deeper sweetness come through. If you plant only one long season crop this August, this is the one worth the commitment. Number 17, scallions. Scallions will never be the plant your neighbor stops to ask about over the fence. They do not form a dramatic head, they do not need a trellis, and they will not take up much space in your beds. But they might end up being the vegetable you actually use the most, because they go on eggs, into soups, over rice, on top of noodles, basically anywhere that needs a little fresh sharpness at the end. Sow the seed directly in August and expect sprouts within about 7 to 14 days. The real trick with scallions is how you harvest them. Instead of pulling the whole plant, take scissors and cut the green tops about 1 inch above the soil, leaving the base intact. More often than not, it will keep sending up new growth, giving you several harvests from a single planting instead of just one. Number 16, Swiss chard. Swiss chard might be the single most forgiving crop in this entire lineup, because it genuinely does not seem to care whether it is dealing with the last blast of summer heat or the first bite of autumn frost. Sow it in early to mid-August about 1/2 inch deep, and give the seedlings roughly 1 to 2 inches of water a week while they get established. The harvest method matters here. Use the cut and come again approach, taking the outer leaves with scissors about 1.5 inches above the ground, while leaving the central growing bud completely untouched. Do that correctly, and one planting can keep feeding you well into the colder months, long after most of your other summer crops have given out. Number 15, arugula. If patience is not your strong suit, arugula might be the most satisfying plant on this list. Baby leaves are ready in as little as 20 to 25 days, with full maturity landing around 40 days. But speed is not even the best reason to plant it now. Arugula grown in summer heat turns sharp, peppery, and honestly a little aggressive for a lot of people. Arugula grown into cooling weather mellows out into something nuttier and far more balanced, while still keeping its distinct personality. The mistake most people make is letting the leaves grow too large before cutting them, which intensifies that peppery bite. Harvest young, around 2 to 3 inches, using scissors instead of pulling the plant, and sow a fresh small patch every couple of weeks instead of using the whole packet at once. That staggered approach keeps you in tender leaves for weeks instead of one big bitter flush. Number 14, kohlrabi. If you have never grown kohlrabi, the first time you see it you might genuinely wonder what part of the plant you are supposed to eat. It is not a root, and it is not really a stem in the way you would expect. It is a swollen bulb that forms above the soil with leaves shooting out in every direction. But once you peel it and slice it, it is one of the simplest vegetables on this list to actually enjoy, crisp and juicy with a flavor somewhere between a broccoli stem and a mild apple. It matures in about 45 to 60 days and actually develops best as temperatures start to drop. The one rule that matters more than anything else here is size. Harvest it small, around 2 to 3 inches across. Let it sit in the ground too long, and the inside turns fibrous and loses that crisp bite entirely. Number 13, leaf lettuce. Every gardener who has watched their spring lettuce turn bitter and shoot up a flower stalk deserves a second shot, and August is exactly that. The challenge is getting the seed to germinate in the first place, because lettuce seed can go dormant when soil temperatures climb too high, a defense mechanism that basically tells the seed to wait for better conditions. Work around it by starting the seed somewhere cool, around 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, for 4 or 5 days before moving it outside, or simply shade the bed with cloth until the seedlings show up. Once it is established, it matures in about 40 to 60 days depending on variety. Harvest the outer leaves and let the center keep producing rather than cutting the whole plant at once, and you will be pulling fresh lettuce well after most people have decided the season is over. Number 12, mustard greens. Mustard greens do not try to be gentle, and grown in the middle of summer heat, they can be genuinely intense, sharp, peppery, almost aggressive on the first bite. But the version of this plant that matures in cooler weather is a different experience entirely. The heat is still there, but it softens, and a subtle sweetness starts to come through behind it. Baby leaves are ready in about 3 weeks, with full cooking size arriving around 30 to 45 days. If your area is still holding onto serious summer heat, wait until the second half of August to sow, or find a spot with some afternoon shade to keep the young plants from stressing out early. All right, we are about halfway through this list, so real quick, if this is helpful to you, go ahead and subscribe so the next planting guide actually shows up in your feed, and drop your city or your growing zone in the comments if you have not already. I genuinely want to see how much these dates shift depending on where everyone is watching from. Okay, back to the countdown. Number 11, beets. Beets quietly give you 2 harvests out of 1 packet of seed, and a lot of gardeners never take advantage of that. Before the roots are even close to ready, the young leaves above ground are already edible, tasting something like spinach with a deeper, earthier note underneath. Just do not strip the plant bare. It still needs those leaves to feed the root developing below. One trick worth knowing: what looks like a single beet seed is actually a small cluster containing several seeds, so do not be surprised when multiple seedlings pop up from one spot. Thin them early, and instead of throwing away the seedlings you remove, wash them and use them as microgreens. Soak the seed overnight before planting to help speed up germination, and sow at least 8 weeks before your first frost if you want full-sized roots. Cut that closer to 6 weeks, and you will mostly end up with greens instead, which honestly is still a completely usable harvest. Number 10, broccoli. Broccoli gets a bad reputation from gardeners who planted it at the wrong time and assumed the plant itself was the problem. Spring broccoli often runs straight into early summer heat right when it needs to be forming a tight head, and the result is a small, loose head that bolts before it is worth eating. August flips that entirely in your favor. Start with transplants around 4 to 6 weeks old rather than direct seeding this late. Harden them off for 3 to 5 days with reduced water and full sun exposure. Then set them out in the late afternoon and water immediately. It matures in about 70 to 80 days, and because cool fall weather slows growth down, the heads that form tend to be larger and tighter than anything you would get in the heat. After you cut the main head, leave the plant in the ground. Side shoots will often keep coming for weeks afterward, giving you multiple harvests from one plant. Number 9, turnips. Most people who say they dislike turnips have only ever eaten an old, overgrown one, tough, woody, and way too sharp. A young turnip pulled at the right time is an entirely different vegetable, crisp and mild. Planted before mid-August, the plant puts its energy into a sweet, crisp root, maturing in about 50 to 60 days. Planted a little later, closer to September, that same plant shifts its energy toward producing leafy greens instead of a big root, which is still worth harvesting on its own. Thin the seedlings early so the roots have room to actually expand, and do not wait for the biggest possible turnip before pulling it. A smaller, crisp one beats a large, woody one every time. Number 8, spinach. Spring spinach is always in a rush, racing to grow before the heat forces it to bolt. Fall spinach has the opposite problem. It is not fighting the clock, it is fighting the warm August soil, because spinach seed has a built-in defense that stalls germination once soil temperatures climb too high. Work around it by refrigerating the seed for about a week before planting, or soaking it in water for roughly 24 hours to trick it into waking up. Once it germinates, it matures in about 35 to 45 days and turns out to be one of the most cold, hardy plants on this entire list, tolerating temperatures down to around 25 degrees Fahrenheit without damage. Harvest the outer leaves first. Let the center keep growing, and every cold night from here forward is only going to make the leaves sweeter. Number 7, collard greens. If lettuce is the delicate plant on this list, collard greens sit at the complete opposite end. They will not give you a fast, dramatic harvest like arugula or radishes, and they do not have a colorful root like beets. What they offer instead is durability. Set out in August, Collard build up their foliage through September and then keep producing for weeks, often standing strong long after other plants in the bed have given up for the season. Harvest the lowest, outer leaves first, and let the center keep pushing out new growth, which means one plant can genuinely feed you for months if conditions stay reasonable. And just like kale, the flavor actually improves after a frost, the sharpness softening into something deeper and sweeter. Number 6, carrots. Carrots will test your patience before they even sprout. The seed needs to sit only about a 1/4 inch deep, and at that shallow depth, bare soil sitting under direct August sun can climb past 140 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to kill the seed before it ever gets a chance to germinate. The fix is simple but non-negotiable. Cover the seeded row with damp burlap or a board to hold in moisture and block that direct heat, then pull the covering off the moment you see sprouts. It matures in about 70 to 80 days. Thin the seedlings to roughly 2 inches apart so the roots have room to grow straight instead of twisting around each other. The payoff for all of this patience comes after a few cold nights, when the plant converts stored starch into sugar, and the root turns noticeably sweeter than anything you would pull in the middle of summer. Number 5, kale. Kale does not just tolerate cold weather, it genuinely uses it. When temperatures drop, the plant converts some of its stored starch into sugar as a way of protecting its own cells from freezing, and that chemical shift is the exact reason kale picked after several cold nights tastes sweeter and more tender than kale picked back in September. Set it out in August so it has time to establish before the real cold arrives. Harvest by cutting the outer leaves from the bottom and leaving the center growing point alone, and the plant will keep pushing out new leaves and growing taller well into the colder months. Very few vegetables on this list keep producing as reliably or reward the cold as directly as kale does. Number 4, cauliflower. Cauliflower is the least forgiving plant on this entire list, and that is exactly what makes it satisfying to get right. Broccoli gives you a second chance through side shoots. If the main head disappoints, cauliflower usually only gives you one real shot. Start with transplants around 5 to 6 weeks old rather than direct seeding this far into the season. It needs steady, uninterrupted moisture, because even a short stretch of stress from heat or dry soil can cause the head to form too early or stay too small, a problem growers call premature buttoning. It matures in about 70 to 80 days. Harvest while the head is still firm and tightly packed, before the individual sections start separating, because waiting even a few extra days for more size can noticeably drop the quality. Number 3, radishes. Nothing on this list moves faster than a radish. Some varieties are ready to harvest in as little as 20 days, with most landing somewhere between 20 and 40. The smartest way to plant them is not all at once. Sow a fresh short row every 10 to 14 days instead, so you get a steady rolling harvest instead of one giant flush that goes woody before you can eat through it. Keep the watering consistent too. Letting the soil dry out and then hitting it with a heavy watering is exactly what causes radishes to crack and turn unpleasantly sharp. Pull the largest ones first and leave the smaller ones a few more days rather than waiting for every single root to reach the same size. Number 2, peas. Sugar snap and snow pea varieties are a little unusual in how they handle this transition. The seed germinates just fine in warm August soil, but the plant actually flowers and fills out its pods better once the weather cools down. One thing to plan for, because the days are getting shorter, fall peas typically need about 10 extra days to mature compared to a spring planting, so build that buffer into your countdown from your first frost date. Soak the seed overnight before planting to speed up germination, and give the plant some kind of simple trellis. It is not strictly required, but it improves airflow and cuts down on disease. Depending on the variety, expect maturity somewhere between 60 and 90 days. Number 1, bush beans. Every single vegetable on this list so far has one thing in common. They are all racing toward the cold, using it to their advantage, getting sweeter and more tender because of it. Bush beans are the exact opposite. They are the only true warm season crop on this entire countdown, and that is exactly why they sit at number 1. The seed needs warm soil to germinate. The plant needs enough warm days left to flower and fill out its pods. and a single light frost can wipe out the entire planting overnight. That is the whole reason this video says do it now instead of do it eventually. It matures in about 50 to 60 days, but because growth naturally slows as the days get shorter, you need to add a buffer of at least 1 to 2 weeks on top of that number when you count backward from your expected frost date. Sow the seed directly into the soil. Bush beans do not like having their roots disturbed by transplanting. And here is the one exception to almost everything else on this list: do not soak the seed before planting. Where soaking helps beets or peas germinate faster, it does the opposite for beans. The seed absorbs water too quickly, cracks, and rots in the soil instead of sprouting. Water it in after planting instead. Once the plants start flowering, keep the moisture consistent, because a lack of water at that exact stage causes flowers to drop before they ever turn into a pod. And when the harvest starts, pick the pods regularly while they are still firm, before the seeds inside really start to swell. Picking often is what tells the plant to keep flowering and keep producing instead of shutting down early. Plant this too late, and you can end up with a plant that looks perfectly healthy, green, full, thriving right up until the first frost hits and takes the whole thing out in a single night before a single pod is ready. That is why bush beans do not just belong on this list, they are the reason for it. August is not the end of your garden, it is a pivot point. The heat that felt like a problem all summer is actually working in your favor right now, and every one of these 21 vegetables is designed to take advantage of exactly that shift. The real difference between a strong fall harvest and an empty bed by October usually is not about skill. It comes down to timing, working backward from your first frost date instead of guessing and hoping it works out. So check that frost date for your area, read the days to maturity on whatever seed packet you are holding, and decide right now which of these you have time left to plant. Because sometimes the most memorable harvest of the whole year does not start on a warm spring morning. Sometimes it starts with a single seed pressed into hot August soil. At the exact moment, everyone else already decided the season was over. Tell me in the comments which one of these 21 you are planting first, and let me know where you are watching from and what zone you are in. I want to see how far this list travels. And if this helped you get a plan together, subscribe so you catch the next one before your next planting window closes too.